let's go to the phones, swing it down to Austin and a visit with our good friend Chuck DeVore from the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Chuck, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great on this wonderful Texas morning.
Great to hear from you. And there's a lot going on down in Austin and at the Capitol. And one of those things, we have dueling tax plans, tax cut plans, which the optimists out there will say, "Hey, great, we get to debate tax cuts." Everyone wants a tax cut, it seems. We just have two different ways of going about it. Explain for the listeners out there the tax cut plans between the Senate and the House, and which, in your mind, may benefit the state in a more positive way.
Well, first of all, let me say how remarkable this is. Some of your listeners may recall I'm a former California lawmaker. I used to represent almost 500,000 people in Southern California, and I'm a conservative, and as such, my philosophy isn't all that popular in the Golden State. So I left California and moved to Texas. So this sort of discussion about an argument over whose tax cut is bigger and better for the state is something that just causes me to have my jaw drop to the floor.
Did that not happen a lot in California?
No. The other, which tax increase would be better for California? That's the sort of discussion that they have, not a tax cut. So I'm just happier than all get out that this is even happening. Yeah. And so what you have basically is it's almost like a contest between the two houses where you have Representative Bonin in the House saying, hey, my tax cut is bigger than your tax cut, senators. And senators, if you want to defend your smaller tax cut, go right ahead and defend your smaller tax cut. It's almost like, what do they say in Texas? It ain't bragging if it's true.
Yeah.
So basically the House has a bigger tax cut, and what they're focused on cutting the state sales tax rate from 6.25 to 5.95. Okay, so it's a 0.3% cut in the state sales tax rate. Now, of course, the locals typically have up to 2% that they tack on. So this is just the portion of tax that the state collects. Then they also want to cut the business margin tax or the franchise tax, and that's a tax that takes about a little over $4 billion from businesses every year, and of course Texans pay that tax. Businesses don't pay tax; they pass the tax on in the form of higher prices for goods and services to their consumers. So the House version is almost $5 billion, and we like that. We like the fact that the House is proposing a big permanent tax cut. Now in the Senate, it's a little less. And what the Senate is doing is they're proposing a business tax cut too, just like the House. But instead of a sales tax cut, what is being proposed in the Senate is increasing the homestead exemption for residential properties. So the typical Texas homeowner would save a few $100 a year on their property taxes. And the way that works is the state has to reimburse local government for the lost revenue. And so some folks are concerned that the difficulty in that is you can raise the homestead exemption, but local governments may in the future figure out how to increase assessments or increase rates and basically increase the tax. So there's some concern as to how they implement that and make it permanent. But the bottom line is both houses are proposing to cut the tax burden on Texans, which is great.
Yeah, it's a great debate to be had, and really, when I'm looking at this, there are no losers out there. As far as the citizens go, I'm sure Democrats would have another view of that. But
right. Well, of course, government's the loser, right?
Right, exactly, and that is one of the arguments. And I've even heard that argument from some of the more moderate Republican lawmakers. Not many, but a couple out there who say, "Is this really responsible? Don't we need to spend more money on the state?" And we can really probably cut more, can't we?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It depends on your worldview, right? I mean, if you think that government somehow is a generator of wealth and prosperity, and for some people it is. Obviously, there's some businesses and some interest groups that make money off of government. But for most of us, we'd like to be left alone and go about our lives and earn our money and keep as much of it as possible to care for our families, raise our children, go to college, things like that, invest in a business. And tax cuts is a way to encourage more of that, right? A way to encourage more hard work and more innovation and more risk-taking out there in the great state of Texas.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation. Now, I know the governor weighed in, and this was early on in the process, and he said that he would not sign a budget without a cut to the business tax, the franchise tax, and that he wanted significant tax relief, and he did bring up property taxes. Now, in your mind, and I don't know if you've heard anything or not, but do you think that he would sign something that did not include property tax cuts, but did include a sales tax cut like we see from the House?
Right. So my impression from what I've heard, and perhaps I'm mistaken, is that the governor's main priority is, Governor Abbott's main priority is the margin tax relief. Mm-hmm. And that the lieutenant governor's main priority is property tax relief. And overall, they both want tax relief, right? And so I should think that right now, from the governor's standpoint, that both packages in the House and the Senate are probably acceptable to the governor, because from what I recall hearing, I thought the governor was more focused on business franchise or margin tax relief. Right. And both bills in both houses do provide that. So I should think that the governor is in a pretty good place right now with where the tax cut proposals are going in both houses.
Yesterday, the Senate passed a bill that would tighten the spending cap. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that will impact, not right now, but in the future for the state.
Right. So spending caps are very important around the country, although very few states actually have spending caps with teeth in them, right? Even California used to have a spending cap, and then they voted to weaken it, and the rest is history. So what we're seeing now is out of the Senate is Senate Bill 9 by Senator Kelly Hancock. And this bill revises the current expenditure limit in Texas, which covers roughly 40% of overall spending. So what isn't covered are things like federal funds and dedicated funds. So in other words, if something's constitutionally dedicated to go to transportation or education or what have you, it doesn't count toward the spending limit. So about 40% of everything Texas spends is under the limit, and currently that limit is calculated as a forward-looking estimate of personal income over 2 years. So basically they get a few estimates together, and the Legislative Budget Board picks which estimate that they want. So there's a little bit of politics in there. They can pick a higher estimate if they want, spend a little bit more money. What this bill does is instead of using personal income, it goes to a formula of population and inflation. And so we believe that population and inflation formula is more respectful of the people's ability to earn a living and to have a government that they can afford. The other thing that Senate Bill 9 does is instead of doing only forward-looking data, it looks both backwards and forward. So in other words, we're going to include some historical population and inflation data along with some forward-looking data, which makes the forward estimate a bit less political, right? Because you've got some actual historical data that you're basing the growth in government on. And so this is a stronger spending limit, and as such, we are very, very hopeful that if it passes both houses and is signed into law, that what you're going to see over time is a slowing of the acceleration in the growth of government in the state of Texas. So that'll mean less pressure to raise taxes in the future.
Very good. Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation. Appreciate your time today, and we'll visit with you again next week.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good one, Chuck.
You too.
That's Chuck DeVore, TexasPolicy.com for much more information. Their website just loaded with information.